Hello and welcome to this compositing tutorial. So today we're going to look at changing the table surface in this image, so swapping it with this here. So it's normal to have an examination of the image you're going to be compositing. So when we're looking at this, things we need to notice is what direction the light is coming from in the original image, and what the depth of field, so how the image gets out of focus as we move back into the space. So these two things it's good to be aware of before you start doing compositing. So in this image we can see that the light is coming from the left, so just over here, and it's hitting the coffee cup here, and we can see the depth of field is quite shallow. Our focal plane is about here. So these are two things we will have to take note of when we're making our composite. So let's start. So first of all, the first thing we need to do is to separate this object from the background. So we need to separate this, and for that we can use the object selection tool in Photoshop. Now the latest version of Photoshop, which is what I'm using here, 2022, it isolates objects for you when you just move your mouse over them, which is quite nice. In this case we want the saucer and the cup, so I'm just going to actually draw a shape around the area that I want to select and let Photoshop do its thing, and it does a nice selection of that, and we want to refine that perhaps a little bit. So to do that we go to select a mask. So I click select a mask. Let's just change the opacity here so we have it on black, and we can always zoom in to check the edges. So you can see here the edges are a little bit rough, and we can still see a little bit of the original background. So the first thing we need to do is just smooth those edges out a little bit, and then also add a little bit of feathering, and we should also just shift the edge inwards so we exclude any of that original table. We can have a look around, and that looks okay for an initial one. We'll use this with a layer mask so we can clean up the selection later if we need to. It's not perfect at the moment. So in order to output this to a new layer with layer mask, we choose our output settings, new layer with layer mask, and we click on OK. Do Control 0, and now we have a new layer with the layer mask, and we have our original image here in the background, and we have this cup layer in the foreground. And now we can import our wood, our new wood layer. So what we might notice first of all is that with the wood layer, okay, we know the light is coming here from the left. So the wood layer, what we notice with this one is we have down in the bottom right hand corner this brighter area. So perhaps we can use that to our advantage here and have that corner correspond to this corner here. So in order to do that, we'll flip the image by going to edit, we'll use image rotation and flip it horizontally, and then image rotation and flip it vertically, and now we have the lightest part in this corner here. So now we want to move this to in here. So we'll drag up to the tab and then drag over the layer and then just release. And now we have this placed over the top. Now there's a number of ways that we can try and match the perspective of this. I'm just going to decrease the opacity to about 50%, and then I'm going to use the edit transform perspective, and I'm just going to adjust the perspective of this to match with the lines of the image behind. So we want to line this up with the edge of the table nicely. And then we also want to adjust the perspective here to match that also. Okay, that's good from that angle. I'm just going to zoom out again, and I'm going to use edit, transform, and then distort. So we just need to correct the perspective slightly in this corner here. And to do that, I'm just going to move this a little bit further to correct the perspective. Okay, that looks good. So we're going to go with this. We have a gap in the corner. We'll fill that in later. We don't need to fill it in now. I can put my opacity back up to 100%, and I can move this layer by clicking, dragging, and dropping it below. Now I've accidentally locked this layer, so I'm just going to remove that lock, and I'm going to give these layers a name. So cup and table 01. So we know what those layers do. That's good housekeeping. So at the moment it looks, of course, like the cup is a little bit floating in the air, so we need to improve that. We also need to integrate the depth of field a little bit better. So first of all, we'll create a little side for this table using the same wood surface. So in order to do that, again, we go back to our wood and we'll click, drag over the other image and then drop. And then again, we're just going to reduce the opacity, and we're going to do Control T, and we can go to perspective again and just adjust the perspective of this to match up with the side of the table. And we'll just use part of this wood somewhere where there's no gap as the side of the table. And when we're happy with that, we accept the changes. And what we'll do then is turn this off, and I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool to make a selection of this edge, which we'll use as a basis for our mask. So I'm going to do that just a little bit over the other edge, so it's going to go underneath that here, and then we're going to be a little bit more careful here. We can again go a little bit over, bring it up here, and then click on the first edge to close off our selection. Now we can re-enable our wood layer, and we can create a mask by clicking on the add mask icon in the layer panel at the bottom, and that's created a nice layer mask for us there. It looks a little bit out of tune at the moment because it's the same color and tone, and we know that the light, you can see, is hitting the side of the table here because it's quite bright. So what we can do to create that effect is if I come down here, I'm going to create a curves layer, and I'm going to use that to brighten that side up. Now doing this brightens the whole image up, so we need to create a clipping mask. So I go to layer, create clipping mask, or Alt Control G. So it will only affect the layer directly below. So we can do something like that. Okay, the next thing we need to do is create some shadow underneath this to stop it looking like it's floating in the air. So in order to do that, we're going to just go up here to our elliptical marquee tool, select elliptical marquee tool, create a blank layer, and just draw a kind of rough oval shape that might match the same size as the saucer. And then we're going to go to select the mask because we're going to feather and smooth the edge. Okay. and click OK, and then we're just going to simply use the paint bucket tool to fill that with black. So I'm going to hit D on the keyboard to default the foreground color to black, and then fill our layer 2 with black, and let's just call this shadow so we know what it does. And I'm going to hit the V tool and then Control D to deselect. And now I'm just grabbing the wrong layer, so I'm going to grab the shadow layer and I can move that around. And the shadow layer shouldn't appear directly under the cut because we know the light is coming slightly from the left, so we can move that slightly over. Now, in order to integrate the shadow a little bit better with the surface that it's behind, we can use a blend if. So I can move this down here, and then I can go to the blending options, clicking on the blending option at the bottom of the layer panel, and use my blend if to maybe integrate this. So I hold down Alt, and this will allow it to blend in a little bit better with the surface of the wood. So if we look at it before and after, it's a minor change, but we can check it by looking at the image here and seeing how it looks. We can take that a step further as well, so we could create a displace map for the shadow so it integrates with the surface of this texture. So in order to do that, what we could do is we'll turn off all our layers apart from this wood layer, and we will go to layer. So I'm going to discard all the other layers, and then I'm also going to go to mode and turn this to a grayscale image, and then I'm going to go to image adjustments and curves and just create a little curve to create some contrast in this. So this is going to be our displace map, so I'm going to save this as a separate file as a displace map. So underscore displace, and it needs to be saved as a PSD file. So that's our displace map saved. I'm going to go back to my history, back to the last stage, which was here, and now I'm going to apply the displace map to this by first of all going to filter, convert for smart filters, and then going to filter, distort, displace. Okay, I'm going to use the default settings, and I'm going to use this displace map that I created. And now the displace map has been created. So the change is quite minor. You can see, you can decide yourself if it is worth it or not. So the next thing we need to do now is we want to this wood table 01 layer, we want to add our depth of field. So again, we're going to go to filter, convert for smart filters, and we're going to go filter, blur, and we're going to use this Gaussian blur. And we're just going to try and match the blur of the original image here. So let me try 15. So I think that's good, that matches that pretty well. And then using now the mask that comes with the smart filter in combination with the gradient tool. So I'm going to use black as my foreground color and white as my background color, and I'm going to draw my gradient from top to bottom. That's not what I want, so I'm going to choose this. So I need the flat gradient tool, and again we need to reverse this. So this should be, so I'm going to hit X on the keyboard to just reverse the gradient, and we're going to use Okay, I think that's alright. So we've got a good bit of blur going back in here. Now we need to do the same thing to the side of the table. So with this layer here, again, I'm going to go to filter, convert for smart filters. Again, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. This time we need a little bit less blur, so let's try let's go with 7, click OK, and we're going to do the same thing again with the mask. So I select the mask, my gradient tool is active, and I'm going to get the gradient going in the same direction as the edges, and yeah, that looks okay. So now we have our blur added, we have our table blur added, so we just need to fill the table in here. So what we'll just do for that is we'll go to the table 01, we'll double click here, inside here to access the original object, to edit it. So here's the original one, so we're just going to simply do this very brutishly using the clone stamp tool. I'm going to do Alt to sample from down here. Maybe we'll do it from here, and I'm going to simply just paint in the pixels here, and it should be fine because this part of the image is so blurred out it should not be noticeable. So we do that, we have to go File, Save, and close this, back to my original image. Okay, we have a little problem here because it's still showing some part of that, so I need, for this part then we can just crop it out. So we'll just add our crop here, so to remove it. And enter. Okay, so then what we're going to do is because the color on the cup doesn't really match the color on the table, we're a bit off balance with that. We're going to just try and match the cup color with this wood color, and in order to do that we'll use in the filter menu these neural filters that are new to this version of Photoshop, which are being improved all the time, and we'll use this harmonization. So we'll turn harmonization on, we select the reference image, so this image was selected when we selected the neural filters, and our reference layer is going to be this one, and it will process down here on the device. So once it's finished processing, we'll see the color shift occur on the cup. Okay, that's nice. We can turn that down a little bit if we want. It's a bit strong for my liking, so let's turn it down to about, let's try 50%. So again, it processes it on the device, it'll take a moment. Set the output, when this is applied, set the output to smart filter and click on OK. So now it creates a smart layer from that. So now by double clicking on the neural filter, we can come back in and change the strength of it further if we wish so. But I'm pretty happy with that. So this is a before and after, so it's much more matching the darker surroundings that are there. Yeah, so that's it. I'll also put a link to these images. These are stock images taken from pixels.com, and I'll put a link to where these images are on that, so you can practice this yourself. Thank you.